talk will bring about more discussion. So throughout it, there are 3 questions posed. So when I actually ask those questions, speak up. And the teacher in me isn't going to require you to raise your hand, okay? So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jade, and I have epilepsy. So now that I feel like I'm chairing an AA meeting, something my husband would appreciate, I want to talk about something that is beyond a diagnosis. Last year at KetoCon, I told my personal story on the big stage, and I felt like I was coming out of the darkness and into the light. It was the worst and best thing I ever did. I stepped off that stage and I realized something was missing. Because there was so much more to my life and my healing before keto. I went on to share my story on different podcasts, websites, a few other stages. And you know what? I realized for myself, it was time to share more, to go deeper with all of you. Because healing is constant. It's ongoing. Each time, it's a beginning. And in the beginning, it's always the hardest. It doesn't matter if you're writing a talk, making a change, or when something happens that changes everything. It's what you do to move beyond it that matters. I'm going to say it again differently. I have an epilepsy diagnosis. And when I have a seizure, my mind and body are attacked from within. And that little face sums up that feeling. It took me a long time, but I eventually accepted my diagnosis. And it really was the help of keto that did that. But I realize now that I'm standing before all of you, I actually realized it about a month ago. It's time to let it go. It's a process, this healing thing. You're moving, things are always changing. That's the beauty of being human. And I had a pretty good guide when I started out. Everyone, meet my mom. She was my first teacher and guide to finding balance. She introduced me to the world of self-care, and it was the 1980s. Self-care was not as mainstream as it is today. Self-care? What does that mean anyways? And to an 8-year-old, it didn't mean a thing. It was just me going to more appointments, my mom showing me and teaching me different things that people thought were kind of weird and woo-woo. Little did I know that those lessons my mom was teaching me, the books she read me, the different meditations we practiced, and the many healers I met, were leading me down a path towards education on holistic health. And together, her and I created a solid foundation that allowed me to hang on through the struggles with epilepsy. What I didn't realize was that this practice was keeping me grounded, and it led me to learn more and eventually to a career in wellness. But what is self-care really? What do you think self-care is? Think about it like a definition. And a pin drops. Sleep. And that's a tool. But self-care, what is it really? I define it as loving yourself, knowing your limits, connecting with your soul, and creating a routine that fits your personal needs and goals for bringing balance to the body and mind. It's about filling your cup and letting it overflow into life. And this is where you can give back, love, and thrive. But what does self-care look like? Now, Jillian, this is where you pipe in with that.
Sleep.
Sleep. It can look like a lot of things, right? What are some self-care things you guys do?
Right.
Excellent.
Line dancing.
Hike with my dogs.
Excellent. These are all beautiful things, wonderful things. I'm partial to the massage pieces. I'm a massage therapist. But for me, it looks like these tools. Quiet time, acupuncture, meditation, massage, laying under the stars, walking in the moonlight, crystal and energy healing, and aromatherapy. These are all types of self-care, and each of these things are currently part of my personal self-care plan. And by taking time to incorporate these things into my life, I'm able to take care of myself, and it allows me to give back. It wasn't always that way. Epilepsy was my motivator to take care of myself. My mom planted the seeds, but I had to make the choice to practice it daily. Growing up, I wanted to do and be everything, and living with a diagnosis can sometimes make you feel held back a little, so you try harder. So throughout my 20s and into my early 30s, I was extremely overwhelmed, stressed, and exhausted. I would cry in a puddle of tears more often than not. And eventually, I would get myself right and get back to taking care of myself, removing stressful things, removing those things off the plate that's getting heavy. But sometimes it would lead to a seizure, and my plate would fully shatter, which would force me to stop everything. And I would go back to basics. Basics for me was self-care. I did this over and over. I knew what I needed to do for self-care, but often I would slack off and it would all fall apart. I had excuses and I had no balance. Have you ever felt that you had too much on your plate? You know the feeling of saying, yes, I can do that project at work. Yes, I can take care of those kids. Yes, I can go out and party all night. But it becomes too much and you can't do it all physically, emotionally, or mentally. It's a little bit like insanity and a lot like being stubborn, because we want to do it all, right? I have decided to call this cracked or shattered plate syndrome. I battled it over and over as I was growing up. My mom would always say, Jade, you have too much on your plate. Being stubborn and taking on too much, that was me. And it eventually leads to a plate that is weakened with cracks, and in my case, a fully shattered plate. We as humans have the habit of piling things on our plate, me included, even today sometimes. And we spend less time filling our cups, taking care of our personal needs so we can be functioning, loving, and happy humans. Oftentimes, our body will force a change. It will begin with warnings like weight gain, sleep troubles, aches, feeling tired, mild stress. We may listen or not. If we don't, it will scream louder with depression, anxiety, chronic and physical pain, obesity, type 2 diabetes, chronic inflammation. This list goes on. The question is, are you listening to your body? Each morning, I rode my bike to work throughout my 20s and early 30s. I taught my water aerobics classes and Payo classes and yoga classes. I received 2 massages a month, weekly chiropractic to combat the stress of my job as a fitness instructor and massage therapist. I practiced yoga 3 to 4 days a week. I took time to disconnect, breathe, rest, play ultimate frisbee with my friends. I meditated, I danced under the stars. But balance still eluded me. So let me ask you this. What are some ways balance eludes you? I can relate to all those things, you guys, even the silence. I've been able to notice cracked plate syndrome, when it flares up. And the days of crying on a puddle on the floor are long gone, because I see myself and the care that I am providing for my well-being is something that is ongoing. It never stops. It's essential. Remember, my mom planted the seed, but the only way for it to grow was for me to water it daily. I was the queen of self-care, but I couldn't find the total balance my body needed to thrive. Each time I had a seizure or some health issue reared its head, I would shovel on fertilizer and self-care the heck out of myself, thinking that was going to make a difference. It's like shoring up my tree's root system, and it did. It helped for a bit. But then 3 months later, I'd be right back doing the same thing, feeling overwhelmed. Self-care alone wasn't getting the job done. I needed to find complete balance, and in 2015, my sister recommended I look into the ketogenic diet. It became my missing piece of the puzzle. Before keto, I constantly ate too much sugar and carbohydrates that always took me off track. It wouldn't matter the amount of self-care I did, the amount of sleep I got, exercise, it didn't matter. So why was this my missing piece? Why is keto my missing piece? I had spent much of my life trying different ways of eating. I was a vegetarian for 12 years. And then, worked my way to paleo and then eventually keto, which provided the required fuel for my brain, which would give my body the chance to begin healing. With a ketogenic diet, it brought focus for me. It was simplicity. It was real food. I didn't have to think so much about it. Purpose, the ability to lower my meds. It eventually became more than just seizure freedom for me. A clean fuel source, ketones for my brain, something to depend on so I wasn't always having to reach for glucose, sugar, or something to pump me up with energy. This allowed me to see things more clearly, especially my emotions and how I react to the world around me. Internal work began happening with keto. It was just a simple act of eating real food. And this lifted the burden of the medication side effects, the chronic pain, and it allowed me to truly focus on the external and internal parts of my life, to zero in on true structural body issues, emotions, and finding true inner peace. The right fuel source had cleaned up that emotional roller coaster of epilepsy, and it allowed me to begin healing in a very different way. On a side note, I'm almost 4 years into keto, so it's like this beautiful process. It just does not stop. But what does keto look like partnered with self-care? It's a present. It's about being present. After finding my own balance and seeing the benefits of self-care and keto together, the ability to think clearly, balance my emotions, notice body flare-ups when they happen, and know when my brain is just slightly off due to stress. All of these were not possible without both self-care and keto. I had this moment, and I knew diet was important, I knew self-care was important, but truly living it and practicing it daily opened my eyes. And I began to notice something in the people around me. I noticed cracked plate syndrome in my massage and keto coaching clients, and the imbalance that existed. Each time a client would make progress, but something gave. They either stopped doing a massage that they always did, they ate something off plan, they quit going to the yoga class, and all the issues they were dealing with just sparked up again. It would flare to the point that they were uncomfortable and it felt like starting over again. It was always a few things here. It was eating the wrong foods, or an inconsistent or non-existent self-care routine. Without balance, it would constantly continue to lead to poor results. Balance is the key. Whether it's keto and self-care, there's a balance here. I personally came to understand the importance of self-care and keto, and that together they created a balance in the human that can create untethered possibility. It doesn't matter if your foundation starts with keto or self-care. but we need both. Which leads me to the stability tree. I like to think of wellness and humans as growing trees. If we have a strong foundation, we can balance our plate and avoid cracked or shattered plate syndrome. But it takes a combination of the real food and self-care. It starts with a seed or sapling, and I look at that as the education piece. So how are you educating yourself? It was like my mom teaching me and nurturing me. Maybe yours starts with a book, a yoga class, nutrition, or the ketogenic diet. I was taught all about self-care techniques and the importance of taking care of myself. That was my foundation. It always comes down to education though. The more we learn, the stronger we get, and our root system is born. The roots and the trunk of the tree is the constant and daily implementation, weekly implementation. It's the commitment, and over time, that focus on your diet and self-care can create that solid root foundation and strong trunk that'll give stability, balance, and foundation to live with a diagnosis, a disease, or the simple stresses of the crazy world we live in today. Once the foundation is solid, you can begin to thrive and grow. And as you grow the tree, the branches reach out, right? And they become your awareness and warning. They can balance you or topple you. They are both the strength and weakness of a tree. They are your vulnerabilities, your temptations. If we don't continue with our implementation and education, these branches can break us if we don't listen to them when something is slightly off. If we stray from nutrition, stop our self-care, do too much of one thing like working out, eating bad foods, we can begin to lose balance. Life and outside situations will constantly tempt you. But think of the tree that can withstand a storm. And if they have a solid trunk and foundation, you have a starting point, you can thrive and produce. Leaves and flowers and fruit are the growth and sharing. This is the point where we reach out to each other and we share what we know. With balance, we find a growth and understanding about ourselves and we share it with others. There is no one way to balance. There is no chart to tick all of this off. It can start with a diet, it can start with self-care. My guess is many of you may have started with the ketogenic diet, you are at KetoCon. But if you're finding that you're not getting all the results you want, have you looked at your self-care or thought of tweaking your diet? Because you need both balance to find a strong stability tree. But it doesn't stop there. You know, people will start to feel good, right? And we're like, I don't need to do anything. I can go back to what I was doing before. But you can't. A tree needs constant pruning and fertilizing. And, I'm sorry, it needs constant care. So you have to constantly give to yourself and take care of yourself and make it a prioritize what will have the biggest impact for your health. See yourself as a system. You are like the tree of life. Sometimes we have to cut things out. We have to remove them. We have to change things. Maybe it's really hot out, like you're in Texas, and you need to water the tree more. Something that isn't serving you needs to be changed. And in doing so, you will always come back to the balance. A solid self-care plan, a well-formulated ketogenic diet, it will lead to a strong stability tree that can give one balance to withstand any and all that life throws at you. The strength of a stability tree helps one avoid cracked plate syndrome. But first we must choose one of two paths in seeking that balance, and this is where mindset comes in. You can be the spectator. Spectator allows life to control them, gives into circumstances, constantly seeing life as something that is happening to them, and always feeling out of balance, letting the outside world, people, situations affect them. The spectator will continue to struggle and have no structure and no balance. Life is always going to happen. As the saying goes, it doesn't matter what you do, it's gonna happen. It is okay to sometimes be in the spectator role. I've spent time in there, but staying there won't allow for true inner growth. We have a choice. You have a choice, and you can break that constant cycle and choose the warrior. The warrior moves beyond their circumstances, seeing challenges as an opportunity to learn. Nothing is negative for too long. Eventually, a warrior sees life circumstances as lessons and limitations as warnings, and a chance to do something different. A warrior is constantly aware, and they're making constant tweaks and changes to things in search of that balance. It's a game, right? We're always playing it. But they always go back to their foundation in education, because life is always going to happen. The answer for the warrior is, I can move through this and beyond it. We need both self-care and real food to thrive, but we make the choice on what role and mindset we take in our story. I choose warrior. What will you choose? Each of us has room for improvement when it comes to diet and self-care. Ask yourself, where you need to put your most energy towards making the biggest health and wellness impact for your well-being. See today as a beginning and an opportunity to build your own stability tree and seek inner balance. So if anybody has questions, it can be self-care related or epilepsy related or whatever, you can just come over to the mic and ask that, and